we had put out a report in 2012 using this modeling tool just for fun. Hey, what would it look like if Rhode Island had no sales tax? We didn't expect it to go anywhere at the point. We were young. We were less than a year old. We weren't credible yet. Who the hell are these guys? You know.
Now, let me step back for a second. How do you make the jump? Because you're a Harvard grad, right?
Yep. Economics.
Right.
Major.
How do you make the jump on a personal level? Because, again, we see you out there, but want to know a little bit more. How do you make the jump from Harvard to the National League to
the American League,
right? To American League to free market politics. How does that happen?
Well, if you think about it, free market is really endorses the whole competitive nature. You compete, you win, you lose. If you lose, you get up, you dust yourself off, and you try again. That's the free market. Free market has successes. Free market has failures. But free market is the only way that we can drive ourselves to excellence and to be the best we can be. Dependence on government, conversely, brings out the worst in us, the laziness in us and the idleness in us, versus competition if you have to compete. I mean, I tell the story, I faced Dwight Gooden his rookie year. Shea Stadium in front of 52,000. Struck out 3 times, first 3 times up. Got up 4th time and struck out again.
Excellent.
But that's it. It's pretty much the same philosophy. We need to compete to be successful. Rhode Island is so uncompetitive right now. It's crazy.
But my kiddo, for example, goes to an Ivy League school, and now she's only been there a couple months. I can tell you that there aren't already. I mean, got
to be Dartmouth with a sweater like that.
No.
Surprisingly, no.
I walk onto their campus and I feel evil. All right, I sense this. It's sort of like Harry Potter, right? But so, how does a free market thought process arise even out of the bastion of hell that is the Ivy League economic
that doesn't make any sense at all.
And
you've sent your daughter to a school like this because you know it's going to build her brain.
No, because she is strong enough to overcome it. She went to a Quaker prep school with a Romney sticker. Okay,
people build brains. That's the point of education. Not everybody will go through a program with a built brain. But that is the purpose of it. So,
right.
This idea that, oh my God, it's a liberal institution, get over it. She'll either hone her arguments in the other direction or she'll take some stuff in and think about it. But, this idea that there's some sort of lockstep thought factory at any given college, whether it's conservative or liberal, is a little ridiculous.
Well, I mean, of course you're right.
I know I'm right.
But for the record, that isn't going to dissuade me from engaging in cheap sensationalism. No, all right.
No, but I take great pleasure and glee in skewering your cheap sensationalism.
Yeah, but listen, 4 words: commencement speaker, Obama, and I can't say the 4th one. Anyway, so you came out of Harvard, and was it?
I can remember the moment sitting in economics class when I became a conservative. I was incredibly green in a different way.
Okay.
And naive when I was in college. I mean, about a lot of things, especially politics. I couldn't even have told you the basic difference between a Republican and a Democrat. I knew I hated Jimmy Carter and loved Ronald Reagan for reasons I didn't know.
Because your dad did, or something. Somebody.
Maybe.
But for the record, here in this radio show, we believe there are no differences either.
Okay. Yeah, well, you're probably right.
Well, I think it's certainly less. There's fewer differences now than there were 30 years ago.
Exactly. Right. So you're in class.
So I'm in class, and we're talking about literally having a good, open, honest debate about the benefits and dangers of a welfare state. How much is the right amount of assistance and how much is too much before it becomes a disincentive to work. And I can remember right there at that instant, things starting to click for me in my competitive nature, baseball. I always draw back to that because it's my baseball. You work hard, you succeed, or you don't. And if you don't, you work harder and then you succeed the next time. And it just from that moment forward, I became a conservative in that liberal bastion. So yes, Kristen, you're right. There is room for independent thought.
Yeah, there's a point where you're listening to arguments, and at some point your brain should be clicking in and going, "That makes sense," or "That doesn't make sense," and here's why I think it doesn't. And
that's right.
P.O., I know you cannot wait to post this podcast on the Occupy pages that you have been
that I'm reviled on
and visiting as of late.
You mean the one I had to get yeah, right.
There's even hope for some of them.
Why is it? Why do you think that free market concepts do, for lack of a better term, freak people out? And I know when I'm out talking about anarcho-capitalism and free markets, in an artistic, in a musician type setting, or just out at a bar having a few drinks and these things come up. I mean, the what you faced on those very pages, it freaks people out. Why is that?
I've got a word for it.
We are on an FCC station. Just
non-conventional wisdom, bigotry.
Okay.
In the other way that it's normally talked about, the people who are freaked out honestly believe that certain classes of people can't make it on their own without a handout from the government, and that pisses me off. I've lived with roommates. I've seen people through college and in pro ball and all throughout life. That has nothing to do with your class or your race or anything like that. If people are given the room to succeed, and what freaks people out is, how can you not give those poor people a handout? That's what freaks them out, and that is bigotry in itself.
That kind of plays into what we were talking about with Woonsocket. Just regular folks, again, for lack of a better term, who saw a need to raise funds and raise food and just went out there and did it. And when they got shut down, they said, well, yeah, that's too bad. We're going to do it anyway.
Well, Sue Carcieri, and the quote that I use all the time is, and this is a paraphrase, is the bigotry of diminished expectations.
That's right.
So
exactly right.
Right.
But yet the conservatives and libertarians are the ones who are called bigots when we don't promote a really robust welfare state.
Well, I've always believed that capitalism was a method for which people could truly achieve their dreams. And the reason why I say that is because ultimately, if you work hard and are successful, you generate returns for yourself personally. And this is quite Ayn Randian, but you generate returns for yourself on a personal level, and you invest in other people not out of some false patronizing altruism, but you do so to enhance your continued success. Therefore, when people with great ideas or great work ethics or great products come to you and you invest in them, that perpetuates capitalistic success. And what's great about this nation is that until very recently, we looked to people who were successful. We're also good people, but who were successful as an ideal, as something to strive for. Mm-hmm. Now we denigrate those people because they're the quote-unquote evil rich. And while I'm solidly middle class, I'm sad to say, all right, that doesn't mean that I have to then loathe the people who've been able to make it to that next step.
Well, I don't think it's not productive to hate people for being successful, but I do think some people invite criticism by behaving like they're entitled, like.
Well, but
if you've become successful by underpaying all of your employees and undervaluing them, and you've brought in $300 million on the backs of people who can barely eat, you're not really as successful as you think you are as a human being.
But if I may, Chris, and that's the myth, that you're perpetuating the myth. The myth is that people got rich by some underhanded nature. If they were underpaying employees wouldn't stay with them because they're free to go anywhere they want. If they were overcharged,
not in the soft job market.
They were theoretically, you're right.
Yeah.
But think about it. But really think about it.
Theoretically, you're right too. A lot of this is theory, and we're talking, as you know, as an economist.
And if you're overcharging, people wouldn't be buying your product unless you were given a government monopoly or something like that.
Or unless you have other competitive advantages that gave you the monopoly early on.
Well,
there are monopolies
aren't good,
and they're not necessarily always caused by the government.
And they're not. They're not capitalistic. Though.
Agreed.
Well, they can be capitalistic. What's happening in some cases now is that the people who get to the top first are getting the rules changed to favor them so that their competitors can't rise to the same level.
Well, that's crony capitalism.
Yeah,
though,
it is
we
crony
loathe
capitalism.
That.
Right.
But again, and I want to get back on here in a second, but ultimately we talk about minimum wage here a lot.
Yeah.
And we use the Costco versus Walmart example, where Costco pays a living wage in large part because they're successful and they utilize the very best of people. Interestingly enough, I think what you're going to see to evolve his thought to the next step is over the next couple of years, Walmart now is starting to, quite honestly, to slip.
Yeah, it's crumbling around the edges.
Yeah, and for all those who say they were too big to fail, he and I are old enough to remember an article in Business Week that said, "Can Digital Equipment Corp be stopped?" And well, you've never heard of them, so so the Costco model in a purely capitalistic format, and we're not saying just Lord of the Flies. I mean, there are rules, there are reasons for government to exist at the periphery, all right, but the right people get hired to do the right job and are paid fairly because the market demands it. Companies are successful, and then that perpetuates the notion. That's my thought. But
that's obviously a large part of it, and that's a good thing. But I think also the CEO of Costco has some corporate values that he goes into from the beginning, which is that I want to value my employees.
Well, but a lot of that,
I don't want to have a race to the bottom.
But a lot of that, I work in the car business.
Yeah.
And if you want to talk about a group of family-held businesses that are $100 million businesses, and some of them, the guys I work for, are just incredible human beings.
Right.
I mean, they're just wonderful employers, and I've worked for some real
D-bags.
Yeah. and guess who? As we move into a more difficult economy and more challenging, guess who's winning? You know,
Right.
By and large, you know, when people are able through capitalism to realize their own talents and to find that sweet spot that works for them, and they're given a chance then to compete in the marketplace for their services, they excel, and people find ways to get them.
Yeah, and conversely, when they treat their customers, their vendors, or their employees bad, they're not going to succeed.
Yeah, I think I certainly respond badly when it seems to take an incredibly long time for some of the bad players in the marketplace to fall by the wayside.
It's a lot quicker. Again, he and I are old enough to remember where it took an entire generation for the bad actors to fail. Now, everything's at internet.
It does seem to. Well, Walmart's taken its time.
But again,
it is happening.
It's again, we all see it around the edges.
Right.
Well, your organization now has chosen. I call it the three-headed Hydra. All right.
Okay.
You
haven't thought of it that way before, but let's go.
Yeah. Right. On one hand, you've got, and we want to cover all of them. You've got 0%.
Yeah.
You've got unionization of child care workers.
And other groups in the future. Yep.
Right. All right. And on the third level, you're going after health care. Now, if it was possible for a train system to have 3 electric rails, all right, with water streaming between them, all right, you've managed to hit the sweet spot. Let's talk about first, in your organization's mind, what is your priority that you're addressing right now? Is there one of them?
Yeah, actually, you missed our number 2 one because we're just going to be starting that next week. You're going to see some very interesting stuff just next week. Our number 1 issue is the sales tax, even though we believe in other tax reforms, too. The sales tax is just the flagship issue. Healthcare we touch upon. We just happened to do a study on that recently, but it's not a major push you'll see us sustained on. The child care unionization is something we expect is going to move into other groups like healthcare providers and other daycare centers, but school choice is going to be our number 2 issue. So you're going to hear us talking taxes and school choice, and that's probably another one of those.
Okay,
rails,
you managed
right?
to find a fourth.
There we go.
Well, you might as well hit the ground running.
Hydra.
You might as well, yeah.
Do you need someone to coordinate your hate mail?
Because I'm getting really good at it.
Well, school choice is just freedom. It's free. It's a free market for parents to make choices on where to send their kids to school. That's all it is.
And we've seen the pictures recently of folks from the inner city, literally in tears, waiting in line for those lotteries, those despicable lotteries, where just by pure fate, certain people's lives are changed and others aren't.
We did you talk about tears. We did a student essay contest with a youth urban group in Providence. Talk about how school choice could have changed your lives, or maybe might change the lives of someone in your family. And to read those essays, and the common theme was, and I never thought of it this way before, but the common theme was, once we realized we weren't smart enough to test in the classical, we weren't lucky enough to win the lottery to a charter school, or we didn't have the money, which none of them did, to go to a private school. We realized it was done, and we basically gave up. Either we just went through the motions in school, or we or our friends dropped out. Now imagine that. That's the life of one of our young citizens. Mm-hmm. That's the future of our state. And I don't know how many thousands or tens of thousands or even more are giving up because of that. So how can we sit here and condemn any kid to be in a school system where they and their parents feel that way about it?
And getting back to your overall philosophy, we can't expect people to make something of their lives if we don't give them a head start with good schooling.
The biggest ghetto that exists in this country right now, I'm convinced, is educational. On a personal level, I'm blessed because through a quirk, my children are able to attend a private school. Being married to a teacher is not unlike being married to a chef. you'll never want to go out to eat again. Because if you know anything about the sheer chaos and meltdown that's taking place in Rhode Island school systems.
Like steaks dropped on the floor and put back in the plate.
Yeah, it's
the educational equivalent of that.
Exactly. I mean, there's nothing less than an educational holocaust been perpetuated upon the children of Rhode Island. And when you see, and it's ironic because I work in the other extreme. I work in the car business.